My last 4 motorcycles were 1290 Super Adventures from KTM. This is my first BMW 1300 GS after riding KTMs for quite some time. I've put the first 3,000 kilometers on it, and these are my first impressions. What's up, my biker friend? Welcome back to another video. If you follow the channel for a little bit, you know that I've switched brands as of this year. I've had 4 KTM 1290 Super Adventure motorcycles, and then 2026 this is my BMW 1300 GS, so I switched brands and I've now put 3,000 kilometers on this motorcycle and the specs that I've chosen for it. Now, this isn't the first time that I've been riding a 1300. I actually looked in the calendar and all the tours that I've done since last October. We are in May at the moment in 2026, and I started riding the 1300 in Andalusia in Portugal to scout both locations, and I've done 2 Andalusia tours this year and 1 Portugal tour. So I've put a 9,000 kilometers on the 1300 GS already. Different specification was the triple black, so the regular suspension system with a height adjustable suspension, bunch of extra packages like the radar system and so on. But when I picked my own motorcycle, I made a few changes, and these changes came from trying out different bikes. From actually a participant on the ACT Italy tour last year had a very similar spec to what I've ended up choosing, and I had a chance to ride it for a little bit. So I picked different options than you would normally pick, let's say, for a rental motorcycle that we have in the rental fleet. So I'm going to talk to you about my initial impressions, how this particular bike compares to the other 1300 GSs I've been riding, and of course how it compared to the KTMs that I've been riding for the past years, basically. Now, I'm in Sardinia at the moment. I'm halfway through my Sardinia tour, and we have a day where we're not riding, and you see the reason why. It's kind of drizzling today, but also we have some work to do. So all of us on this tour, we have some work to do. So we're taking a little bit of time off. It gives me time to shoot this video and talk about my initial impressions, but they're still fresh in my memory. Now, the specifications that I've picked for my 1300, there's a few things that are visible on the bike and a few things you can't really see when it's just sitting here behind me. The first thing that I got was the sport suspension, so that puts up the bike 20 millimeters higher. It's a sport suspension, something I wanted to get on this particular bike. Also got the tallest seat, and both settings actually changed quite a bit the dynamics of the bike, how it handles on the road, how I've been able to put my feet down on the ground and get solid standing. This is as high as my KTM 1290 Super Adventure R, so I can't flat foot the bike, but I benefit from the sort of better dynamics. It kind of rides a little differently because you're not sitting in the motorcycle as much as you're sitting on top of it, so very similar to the KTM feeling. In addition, with the sort of better steering that the 1300 GS models has over the 1250 models. There's a few things, the Enduro package that I've introduced here doesn't really change much how the bike rides, with the exception maybe of the shift levers, the clutch and the brake lever. They're a bit shorter, so it helps with the ergonomics a little bit. But the biggest impact is actually the suspension on the bike. Now, the bike that I was riding in October and earlier this season was a triple black with a ride height adjustable suspension system, and it was the conventional suspension that was, the typical height. Now, that's a great feature if you have a rental motorcycle, because it just accommodates riders of different heights, as you would find, when people ride the bikes. So if you don't know what that is, it basically wasn't invented by BMW. It was actually Harley Davidson that came up with it, but it sort of lowers the suspension. I think it's like 30 millimeters when you are below a certain speed. I don't know, it's like 15, 20 kilometers an hour, but it sort of lowers the bike. You can't even feel it when you ride the bike, but it allows you to flat foot the bike, even if you're only like 1.70 meters tall, let's say. And it brings up the suspension again once you pick up a certain speed. So that really helps. It also helps you with putting the bike on the side stand as it sort of lifts up the bike, and all these assistants are great. I usually turn them off because that is actually too low for me. I like to have a certain height on the bike, and you can turn it off, which is fine. So only when you turn the bike off, it'll sort of, resume to its lowest setting when you park the bike. But it's a good feature to have if you need it. I didn't need it. Also, I wanted the higher suspension in this particular bike, and also wanted to get used to it, because now after riding for 9,000 kilometers on the triple blacks with lower suspension, it takes a little while to get used to the bike being higher up. So it's, kind of trying to put my foot down, and there was definitely a bit of a gap. So just getting used to it now, after the past, let's say, week and a half I've been riding this bike, I want this to be in the same setting, because I have every intention to take this bike off-road towards the end of the year. And when you have a suspension system that's higher off the ground, or it changes how high you are off the ground, once you ride it off-road, you want the suspension to be high up, right, to clear sort of obstacles. So if you only set that to whenever you ride off-road, you may just sort of miss a step and you can't hold the bike. So that's for that reason I don't want anything to be height adjustable. Even when it comes to the disadvantage that I can't flat foot the bike anymore, but at least I'm getting used to the height of the bike. I'm getting used to being careful where I put my foot down. So this is the reason why I did not pick that option. Now, a few things that are quite surprising to me when I sort of started riding this bike, because the riding position with the higher seat and the taller suspension, I don't know how to best describe it. It's a bit more dynamic, because you sit on top of the bike. It just, it balances differently when you turn it into a corner. So I immediately like that right from the beginning. And now after putting sort of lots of curvy roads that we have here in Sardinia, long distances, definitely an ergonomics that I really prefer on the motorcycle. There's also been a change on this particular bike when it comes to the quick shifter. Now, I was hoping for some quiet time here in this back end of our hotel in Sardinia, but there's work is now behind me. Let's see how this works going forward. Now, there are a few accessories on the bike, especially on the 2026 model, that were quite surprising, and I don't know if they're that well documented, but if you would have asked me about the quick shifter on the 1300 GS, everything up to the 25 model, I would have to say, I'll tell you that that's by a long shot the worst quick shifter on any adventure bike that is out there on the market. I don't know why BMW was struggling so much with getting a proper quick shifter in, but if you compare it to the Ducati Multistrada, if you compare it to the 1290 Super Adventure series, the BMW quick shifter was always the worst. Now, that's one of the surprising changes that I've made now with the 26 model. I'm not sure if that is because of the automatic transmission that is sort of using the same tech, and they've sort of refined that a little bit, but it's definitely a whole lot smoother, especially compared to all the predecessors of the GS line, which I think is great. It's not quite on the same level as the KTM and the Multistrada, but it's definitely much, much better than it was on the earlier models. Now, for this motorcycle, I got the Enduro package on it. There's several reasons why I did. First of all, the sort of turn signals are now in its sort of regular place and not in the handguards, which allowed me to put the bark busters on there. I still need an upgraded package to protect the underside of the motorcycle. The crash bars are actually okay, but I'm going for the Lone Rider sort of full protection package that's going to come on the bike sometime in the next weeks or months, depending when the parts are available again. And I have every intention of riding it off-road sometime in September. I have 2 tours planned. One is the ACT Italy and the other one is the Trans-Italia Marathon. So there'll still be changes coming up sort of throughout the season. Now, one of the biggest surprises for me when it comes to features that I thought are completely useless is actually a feature now I end up using almost daily when I'm riding the bike, and that's the electric windshield adjustment. Now, this bike has a electric windshield, a motor that brings up the windshield. And when I first saw that, it's like the world wasn't really waiting for this. I was like, what a dumb feature. And now I use it more than any other feature on the bike. That's basically where I have my sort of quick custom buttons are always set to adjust the windshield. And the great thing about that is if you have a manually adjustable windshield, it's in reach, you can adjust it, but you don't really do that much. You set it to a height, maybe you lower it a little bit if you go off-road or something, but you usually keep it on the same height. Now with this, you can sort of dial it in. If you go a bit faster on the Autobahn, need a bit more wind protection. If it's cold, if it's raining, you bring up the windshield a little bit, and vice versa. If you are getting a little too warm, we're in Sardinia, we have temperatures up to 28 degrees already, so you just lower the windshield, get a bit more airflow in, and it's seamless. One of those features that I absolutely love on this bike, and I don't want to miss. The one thing that I really noticed and appreciate in touring with this motorcycle is how smooth this bike is. Now the engine, even though the characteristic is so different from the KTM engine, which is a bit more sporty, a bit more aggressive, what makes the BMW 1300 GS engine so special is the large amount of low end torque and the smoothness, especially at low RPMs. That's basically where the KTM is struggling quite a bit. You know, if I would have a, you know, a second gear or third gear and have low RPMs, it would kind of jerk on the chain and it wouldn't be very smooth in the very low RPM range. And that's exactly where the 1300 really shines, especially here in the curvy roads. You can let it flow through the corners, and it is very, very smooth on the roll on of the throttle. So for touring, I think that is amazing, and I'm really starting to like it, even though I've ridden the 1300 now for quite some time. It's just something I really start to appreciate, especially on this tour. Sometimes if we're not going super fast, I can take some of the corners in third gear and just kind of smoothly roll through the corners. And that's something I couldn't do with the KTM. So it's great for that, especially if you want to take it a bit easy. If you want to go a bit faster, it's got that too. So I had a few sections where I had to kind of, you know, speed through the corners a little bit. So it's got the top end power. It has amazing brakes to match. I would think the brakes are definitely snappier than on my KTM. There's definitely a bit more bite to the brakes, which I really appreciate for road riding. Now, there's a reason why KTM does that on their bikes. For off-road riding, you don't want that strong bite, but here on road riding, it really, really makes a difference. Another thing, of course, as a change to what I had before, I had larger wheels, a 21 inch and 18 inch in the rear. That means that your front tire is pretty narrow, so there isn't a lot of sort of rubber touching the ground. So if you corner really hard, that's the part where it gets a little iffy on the 1290 Super Adventure R. Now with this bike, you have the typical 19-inch front end wheel and the 17 in the rear, and you have sort of wider tires that give you better contact patch on the pavement. So you feel much safer when you kind of corner, especially here in Sardinia where the grip is so great. So for road riding, I really appreciate that. One thing I need to talk about when I talk about the suspension is, of course, the very unique Telelever design of the front fork of the BMW. Now, BMW is known for having that specific design. It's the only manufacturer that does the Telelever design. Now, what it does is just the way the suspension components are mounted is that it doesn't have the typical dive of a conventional suspension. Now, modern bikes like the Multistrada with the semi-active suspension system, they do that electronically with the suspension, but this is just almost by design that there isn't a whole lot of dive in the bike. That's good and bad. It's just something to get used to. You know, if you're used to conventional suspension, you have a bit more feel what the front end of the bike does, you know, how it sort of shifts the load to the front and how it sort of unloads it when you accelerate out of a corner. That's great to have. You don't really have that. And I think that's when people talk about being a bit disconnected from the road with a BMW GS. I think it's just a matter of getting used to. The benefit of it is, of course, it stays pretty stable. Usually you want the bike to be sort of, you know, not moving too much when you turn a corner. So that's a great benefit to have. Now, I've had a GS before, so it didn't take me that long to get used to it. And like I said, I've ridden the 1300 now for 9,000 kilometers. So I had plenty of time to get used to it. It rides quite nice. It's just different. I don't think it's better or worse than on any other bike. I think I like it the way it works on my bike. Now, as I introduced in my first video, I have the Lone Rider luggage system on the bike, which adds quite a bit of weight to the motorcycle because the panniers in itself, they weigh 9.5 kilos, something that range, plus the luggage rack and then all the content that goes in. And the surprising thing about the GS is, you know, I guess for those riders that have used the GS before, that's nothing new, but it still manages that additional weight really well. Now, I've tried some different setups. You know, we've been riding with the full luggage setup in the transition stages from going from one base hotel to the next base hotel. I've had a day where I just took the content out and just had the empty panniers on the bike, and I had a day where I took all of it off. And of course, the bike rides much nicer if there's no luggage on the bike, but I'm surprised how little the weight impacts the ride of the motorcycle. I don't think this would be exactly the same on my old KTMs. Maybe it's the weight distribution, you know, with the panniers bringing the weight lower a bit and adding the sort of low center of gravity that this particular bike has already. But I'm quite surprised how well the 1300 GS handles additional weight when it comes in form of panniers. So this is just a quick update from me on the 1300 GS, the way I have spec'd it. I'm super happy about the bike. There's something different about riding your own bike and having it specified exactly how you want it. It's been a pleasure to ride this motorcycle. I still have a lot of tours coming up this year, including the off-road part, which is going to be quite interesting. So if you have questions or comments so far, put them in the comments section, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, ride safe, stay awesome.